I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us for day 4 of National Volunteer Week. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Loren. I'm the Manager of Volunteers and Community Outreach at Kerby Centre, but hopefully I have met most of you. I'm so excited for the presentation today, but I just want to mention a couple little housekeeping things just right off the bat. First of all, we are going to be recording this webinar. So this live version is just for you guys, just for the volunteers, but we will post a recorded version on our YouTube channel after this. So make sure you subscribe. And the second thing is I just want to mention that if you guys do have any questions, we really encourage you to ask them throughout the presentation and after the presentation, either through the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we can probably work out getting you to ask them live. So hold your questions, write down your questions. We would love to hear them after the presentation. And I won't take up any more time, so I'll give the floor over to Karen Whiteman, who is our Programs Director at Kerby Centre, and she will introduce Crystal today.
Hi, everyone. I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to introduce Crystal to you. So I'm going to read her formal introduction, but just let you know that she is an extraordinary young woman and somebody I've admired for a long time. But here's the formal part so you know why, one of the reasons I admire her so much. She's the health sector lead for Thin Air Labs, which is a health-focused fund and ecosystem in Calgary that will provide investment and support for health ventures. She's also a former national level speed skater and a board director at the 𝐁𝐿 Neurological Foundation, a charity she co-founded in 2010 to accelerate innovative technologies and non-pharmaceutical approaches for neurological disorders. I think she'll probably tell us a little more about that. The 𝐁𝐿 Foundation has raised over $3 million and funded over 90 research projects and programs across the country. It has become a catalyst for change in healthcare and non-pharmaceutical neuroscience. Crystal was named one of 18 Canada's changemakers by CBC to celebrate Canada's 150th. That was so exciting. She made the top 30 under 30 by Explore magazine in 2012 and top 40 under 40 by Avenue magazine in 2016. When she's not moving mountains in health technology, she's climbing them in the Canadian Rockies with her dog named Bear. Crystal, it's such a pleasure. I'm going to turn everything over to you now.
Thank you so much. And I often include my dog just as a warning that if you hear a bark or anything in the background, you know that he's probably within arm's reach, like he always is, especially through COVID. Thank you so much, Karen, Loren, Colleen, for putting this together, for inviting me to be a part of it. And thank you to everyone who is here to participate and listen. Hopefully this can be an engaging discussion after if you have any questions and want to continue a discussion after my presentation. I'm also really excited to be here because having run a nonprofit, I really understand the value and the importance of volunteerism. So anytime that I can be a volunteer and give back as well is really important and such an honor to have the opportunity. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to share some slides to get started on a presentation. So hopefully there is a notification of some kind for someone to tell me that you see a poorly drawn speed skater on the screen right now.
I see it, Crystal. It looks good.
See it? Okay, perfect. That means we're in the right place. I figured I could just talk with my hands because I do that a lot. But this morning I was inspired to do some very amateur hour drawings to help tell the story and do this presentation. So the first picture is a speed skater because my story goes back way back when I was actually better known as Quadzilla, not Crystal. I had these really large speed skater legs at a young age, which is a very genetic advantage in this sport. We're all bottom heavy creatures, and having that genetic advantage and the drive and inspiration from the Olympics, watching it on TV, I was really excited to be a speed skater and was able to accelerate in the sport really quickly. I got to travel the world, represent Canada. As soon as I turned 16 years old, I moved from Beaumont, Alberta to Calgary, because in Calgary is where the fastest ice in the world is and the National Training Centre. So I moved here. I was nominated as an Olympic hopeful for the 2010 Olympics, and everything was going so well. But I did hit a bit of a roadblock. And in a matter of 3 days, I went from one of the top speed skaters in Canada to not walking. I was raced to the hospital, not knowing what was going on. And I had a battery of tests to try and understand how a teenager who was in kind of the top of the world in a sport could now not feel from her chest to her toes. Okay. So then I got the results back from all of these tests, including an MRI, and it showed that I had what's called multiple sclerosis, which is a degenerative disease with no cure. Now, as the doctor was telling me this very scary news, I genuinely didn't even believe her, because up until that point, I hadn't really dealt with a whole lot of adversity, and all I knew was speed skating. And so to be told that, you know, at 19 years old, that I was never going to speed skate again, I just couldn't even believe it or fathom it. So thankfully, with that determination to get back into sport, I was able to utilize the resources that I had on the national training team. I was able to take advantage of the sports psychs and chiros and physios that I had available to me. And through all of that work and a lot of help, I was able to relearn how to walk. I was relearn how to bike. And eventually, although I looked like a baby giraffe on ice, I was able to skate again. And I got back to skating, and then 3 months to 4 months later, I raced my first competition since my recovery. And I remember the crowd was cheering very loudly, because as you can imagine, the sport of speed skating isn't that big. So the community is very tight knit. And it was exciting to see me back in sport, having gone through the medical problems that I did. I remember, however, a different story, because I raced, and it was nice to be back, but I remember crying myself to sleep that night, because my times were now so slow compared to what they were before I was sick. So I wake up the next morning, and it's as if a line was drawn right down the middle of my body, and the entire left side of my body stopped working. It really hit me that, you know, I'm not this invincible teenager. I really do have MS, and I have to do even more and absolutely everything I can to get back to speed skating again. So this is when I entered and explored both conventional and unconventional healthcare systems. And over the course of the next 5 years, I went through a lot of the ups and downs that the multiple sclerosis can bring you. But through that, I also started to develop a program, a health program that was starting to really show results for me. If I broke that program into really simple terms, it's healthy eating, healthy thinking, and healthy moving. I was taking a daily drug injection as recommended by my neurologist, but then I also decided to take care of my diet in a more specific way. I became a nutritionist. I started studying herbal medicine. I spent a lot of time with my sports psychologist and reading psychology books, and of course was modifying my movements and training programs to ensure that it was more appropriate for my health state. So with a combination of these three things, I was able to get back to a high level in sport. And by 2009, I had 5 years after my diagnosis, I qualified for the trials for the 2010 Olympics. And I went into the pre-Olympic season of training, and overnight I lost vision in my left eye, which is a very common symptom or relapse of MS called optic neuritis. So I went back to the neurologist, I got more tests done, and I also got some more scary news. I was told that my disease was actually progressing quite a bit, despite the fact that I was feeling so good and got back to an elite level of sport, despite being told I would never speed skate again. And they recommended a much more aggressive drug treatment plan. And as they started listing the many scary side effects, I thought to myself, you know, these side effects, some of them sound worse than the disease itself. And I'm never going to know whether all of this non-pharmaceutical and healthy eating, thinking, moving stuff is what's helping me get back to an elite level of sport, or if it's the drugs, if I'm doing both at the same time. And with the prognosis that I could be in a wheelchair in the next couple of years, and I should be on more aggressive drugs that may or may not work, I thought, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. So at that point, I decided to go off my drugs completely, treat my disease 100% naturally instead, using those 3 areas. And 8 months later, I came just a few spots off the Canadian Olympic team, and 12 years later is now. And although you can't see me fully, I'm not in a wheelchair, and not only that, but I still have my optimal health and haven't had any major multiple sclerosis relapses since. Now, I often talk to a group of doctors, and I have to preface my story by saying, you know, I'm one anecdotal case of an unpredictable disease. So what worked for me may not work for everyone. And through that thinking, I started to think about, you know, what did I want to do next? I've navigated these healthcare systems, realized that there's a lot of improvements that could be made. And rather than just complain about them, I thought, you know, that maybe there's something I can do about it. So I started to dream up something that became a bigger dream than the Olympics themselves. I imagined starting a charity called the Branch Out Foundation, where we would literally branch out and fund an entire new field of study that focused on some of the unconventional approaches and innovative technologies for neurological disorders like MS, like Alzheimer's, like dementia, like concussion or depression, basically anything that has to do with the brain or a neuron. This was the area that I wanted to focus on and put more scientific credibility behind some of the more natural approaches to finding results. So the only problem at this point is that I have a background of skating in circles for 20 years and definitely no background in neuroscience or medical anything. So I learned this very valuable lesson of how to start a charity and make your dreams come true, especially when it comes to neuroscience and having nothing to do with it. And that's this lesson. I called a bunch of people. I told them about my vision, and it turns out that those people also wanted to see a world free from neurological disorders. So as you can see from this cartoon, the response that I got was overwhelmingly positive, and the reason why I was able to even get going in the first place. It started with just a few yeses, and the momentum continued. I decided to play my strengths, which was I knew how to throw a good party and I loved bike riding. I started a bike tour, started fundraising that way. I was able to collect what I call unlike minds. So people who are scientists or finance experts or engineers or event planners, basically any skill set, you name it, I was collecting them onto the Branch Out Foundation. And with all of that support collectively, we were able to raise over $3 million and fund over 100 neuroscience research projects and programs in 8 universities across the country. Very, very exciting, because when you look a little bit deeper, it's not just numbers. You know, it sounds good, 3 million, 100 researching projects, 8 universities, but what does that actually mean? Now, I wish that we had enough time for me to go into detail about every single research project that we funded, because they are all so inspiring and provide a lot of hope for anyone who's facing currently or is fearful of neurological disorders. So I'll just mention a few here, but on our website, thebranchoutfoundation.com, there's a lot more examples if you want to take a look. So the first example I'll talk about is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's what's supposed to look like a magnet in a thunderbolt. And what that represents is called TMS, or transcranial magnetic brain stimulation. So it's pretty much you take a magnet and you help increase areas of the brain activity that is otherwise decreased or depressed. So for example, if you have major depressive disorder, there's an area of your brain that's less active, causing you to feel very depressed. Transcranial magnetic brain stimulation can take and target that area, increase that activity without any going into your brain, taking any drugs. And we are having overwhelming response of people going from suicidal thoughts to functioning after a 6-week program of TMS. Alberta is now a leader in the world for this type of therapy for major depressive disorder. Not only that, but they're also looking at its ability to increase activity for people, or sorry, decrease activity for in an area of the brain that is overly active in people with Tourette's syndrome. There are many other applications, but we're just getting started, and it's very exciting to watch the trend continue. The other image is supposed to be an avocado, representing, a high-fat diet, also called the ketogenic diet. And we funded some great research that's stopping certain type forms of epilepsy, up to, kids having up to 100 seizures a day, changing their diet to a high-fat diet and eliminating those seizures without the use of any other kind of therapy or medication. On the bottom left, there's supposed to be a supplement bottle. It says B3 or niacin because we did a bunch of research on its ability to shrink a glioblastoma cancerous tumor in the brain. And it had more benefit to using niacin with chemo than chemo on its own. Very promising, and that research is continuing from animal models into human trials now. Lastly, just for today, the music note represents a research project called Ambulosono, where Dr. 𝐵𝐻 from University of Calgary invented a therapy for people with Parkinson's disease, where often when you're walking, you have this freezing effect where you literally can't take a step forward. And if you're listening to music, for some reason, your brain responds positively to it and is motivated to continue moving. So he developed an application to train the brain to rewire itself, motivated by music and movement. So anyways, like I said, I could go on and on and on about all of these great examples, but I would be here all day and night if that were the case. So I encourage you to go to the website if you want to learn more. Through this 9 years of growing the Branch Out Foundation, Karen Whiteman, who introduced me, had a lot to helping me along all of the bumps and bruises along the way of starting a charity from scratch. I discovered another gap in the healthcare system, and that is that we are so good at creating amazing research in this country. We have some of the best researchers in all of those 8 universities and other universities across Canada. The only issue and the gap that I'm noticing is what happens to that research? How do we get that research out of the lab into the hands of innovators and organizations that can carry that research and build solutions and actually put it into practice so it reaches the end user or the patient themselves? So I developed a model that I call Idea to Impact. And really it looks at, okay, we start at the phase of, I have an idea, let's put it through the research lab and see if it has potential to help people. This is Branch Out Foundation's bread and butter. This is where we focus. We take the most brilliant ideas, we find the top neuroscientists, and those neuroscientists are funded to do great research. But then I realized that in order to keep moving it, I took the weight of the world on my shoulders, thinking that the Branch Out Foundation had to make sure that it got all the way to the finish line. And the big realization that I had is that it's not it doesn't have to be one organization. Maybe we can take more of a relay team mentality and pass the baton on to the next person who's more skilled in that specific area. Now, although the Kerby Centre is not neuroscience specific, there was a process to getting Kerby Centre to the stage that it's at right now, where there was probably someone with an idea, some research and development to understand and test whether that idea was going to help people and seniors. And then you were developing a program and solutions and continue to. And then, of course, there's putting it into practice. This is the end impact. This is how everything becomes a reality. This is where people benefit at that very personal level. And this is where all of you on this call are contributing. So I really, really see your role as seriously important in all of these stages, all the way to especially this end where you're reaching the people one-on-one and helping them. So for that, I want to say a big thank you, or thank you, but I also want to share this favorite quote of mine by Dr. Seuss, which is, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So thank you so much for caring a whole awful lot. And thank you so much for all of your work and time. I was able to see the presentation that you had on Monday, and holy, what a great year you've had despite all of the challenges that COVID brought. So again, thank you so much. It's been fun sharing my story, even though I can't see all of your beautiful faces. But I hope that you might have some questions or ideas and stories of your own that you might want to share, because I believe we still have some time left.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Crystal. That very inspiring story. It's amazing. So let me just see here. So no one has asked any questions yet, but I actually have a few of my own, if that's permitted.
Of course.
Okay, perfect. So first off, I kind of wanted to know, can you touch on like what type of volunteer roles there might be at Branch Out Foundation? Like, not that I want to send our volunteers away, but if they were ever interested, what kind of things could they do?
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, there's that pathway of idea to impact. There's that pathway even within one organization of everything that it takes to get to that end result. There are so many random volunteer opportunities through Branch Out. If you're a scientist, you help us evaluate the applications that come in to ensure that we're getting the best scientific research projects funded, all the way to, in order to have the funds for those research projects, we have events. So we have either volunteers who actually create their own events and donate the profits of those events to the Branch Out Foundation, or the Branch Out Foundation co-develops with a team, a committee of dedicated volunteers to create something like the bike tour. We've created Your Brain on Art, which we pair up artists from around mostly Calgary, but some from outside. We pair them up with a neuroscientist, and those artists actually are inspired to create art based on the neuroscience funded by Branch Out. And then we have a big celebration and we auction off the art. And that was able to raise $50,000, which is 10 more undergraduate research projects that we can fund. So we got the bike tour, Your Brain on Art. Those are our two big events that happen every year. COVID has obviously changed some things for a live event. So we've been able to create a digital version of both of these. This summer, we are creating a digital event called Your Brain on the Move, where you register to participate. You pick any movement that you want. It could be skipping, it could be biking, it could be hiking, or it could be walking, or even if you're in a wheelchair, wheeling, and you raise money and then talk about why you do this movement. And then there's fundraising incentive prizes that you can win. There's contests that you can enter, like taking a picture, posting it on social media of you doing a movement or doing a movement in a costume, and keeping everyone engaged that way. So that's this summer, and we're announcing that in a couple of weeks, early May. And then we have a board of people who dedicate an hour to 5 hours a month to the higher level strategy and the governance of the organization for Branch Out. And then, of course, people like Karen Whiteman, who are just so willing to offer up their time and provide mentorship where they saw, where either the Branch Out Foundation has identified a need or whether someone else has seen a potential area where they can provide help in.
That's awesome. So a huge variety of roles that volunteers could take part in. Oh,
Yeah,
that is great. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to ask in the Q&A box if you'd like. But I will ask one more question. I don't want to steal everyone's time, but what would you say to someone who is just recently diagnosed with a neurological disorder? Like, if you could give one piece of advice, what would you tell them?
That is a really good question. I think what I would tell them, if it was only one thing, was that you are the CEO of your own health. We often, take one person's opinion, whether they're in the medical system or on Google or whatever, and we think that that's our prognosis and going to be the story of our life. But I realized through my personal experience and know of many other cases from stories that have emerged over the last 10 years, as I tell my story, people tell their stories back to me, and know that if you take control of your health, you look at all of the different angles of how you can improve. There's a lot more control that you can have to improving your health and improving your prognosis with your disease than you may be led to believe.
Yeah, no, that's great. Go.
Sorry, I was also going to mention now, as a continuation for my 9 years at the Branch Out Foundation, I actually a year ago took on a new career change, which was after 9 years of growing the foundation, realized that my creative juices in going in this one organization were starting to change. And I just knew that if we had a new leader running the operations of this charity, that maybe there could be some new ways that I've never thought of that could grow this charity and actually increase its impact. So I actually moved on to the board as a volunteer for the Branch Out Foundation. And we have a new CEO named Lorene Jensen, who runs all of the operations of the foundation going forward. And now my new role is I joke that I joined the evil for-profit side, but it's actually really related to my same mission of improving health in this world, because the mission of my new job called Thin Air Labs is to create a healthier planet or a healthier future for both people and the planet through capital investment, impact services to provide to new growing companies, and then also community connections and networks to those founders and small companies. So I lead the health sector of this new company, and half of my job is going out there to the communities to understand what does our ecosystem activity look like in the world of anything healthcare. And then I also try to be one of the voices of hope for the healthcare system and health of Albertans going forward. The other 50% of my job is working one-on-one with founders. These are the innovators who take the baton from the scientists and carry the torch to actually build companies that can then reach patients. So I work with those founders, and I develop my listening skills so that I can truly understand what do they need and how can Thin Air Labs or community members support them so that they have the best chance of success, because anyone that we work with, if they succeed, they're going to have a high impact for a healthier future.
Amazing. I actually happened to see one of those projects I just looked at recently was the garden loft for seniors, which just looked really, really cool. Do you want to just touch on that so people know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's this transition period in someone's life as they are aging, which is going from, being totally independent in your own home. Your home might have stairs, it might have things that could be difficult to navigate as you age. So the Dean of Architecture, John Brown from University of Calgary, also has an architecture firm and has imagined this incredible company called Fab Homes in the Garden Loft, where you could create this fabricated home model that could sit in someone's backyard or in a piece of property and is super teched out, and it's also super beautiful. So it's this transition home where you can live there safely. You have access to technologies that help keep you safe, and then maintain some of your, I guess, health goals as you age. And then it lengthens your ability to have more independence before potentially moving into a more full care senior's home.
No, it's amazing. I thought the idea was so cool. I looked at the design. It was very neat.
Yeah, and it's just getting started, and they're going to market this year. So hopefully we'll start seeing these Fab Homes and these garden lofts popping up in people's backyards and in different areas around the city and in rural Alberta. And hopefully we'll have more seniors that have more access to health and a higher quality of life. The other interesting thing about this is, although the initial intention is for seniors, there are other uses, including people with neurological disorders like MS, where if you go into relapse and say are in a wheelchair for 3 months before you can recover and get back out, they have countertops that actually move up and down. So it can actually be modified to your level, your physical level. So it's actually really applicable to not only seniors, but people with disabilities.
Very cool. I like it a lot. Okay, so we didn't have any questions come in. It's a quiet group today, so that's okay because I got mine in anyways. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today, Crystal, and sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here. And if you have any questions that come up later, both you and Karen have my email address, so I'm always happy to continue the conversation online.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today.